Finally, 2 years after Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr.'s second generation clash was kiboshed following 2 failed Conor Benn drug tests, we get this fight on. The original had so much controversy around it because of their fathers, who had contested iconic fights, and although the rivalry has simmered in the recent months, it was one built on pure hatred and brilliant rivalry that neither man ever really forgive the other one for. Ben always felt that he was robbed in the rematch and was handed a draw. The second fight was supposed to be exciting. It was supposed to be thrilling. It was supposed to really spark British boxing again after Anthony Joshua's career had started to go on the wane. But when Conor Benn failed those drugs tests, and more importantly, the fallout from the cover-up that had gone on, he had failed his tests in the summer, and his promoter and Eubank's promoter had worked together to cover it up and to try to keep the fight on. That's left a horrible toxic stain around this fight. Conor Benn has never ever wavered from insisting upon his innocence. Some of the methods and ways that we've tried to explain that, or his team have tried to explain that, have been confusing, and that has probably added to the public's distaste for him, which he'll be trying to repair. The point is, he has been clear to fight. He has finally won his case. The issue around the fight now is that he's not going to be able to explain the evidence he used to win the case, and that's going to hang over this fight hugely. When the press conferences come and the multiple broadcasters pile in and the radio stations that want to get views and clicks, in the same way my own website will, they will either have to ask these questions and be told no comment, or they'll have to not ask them and create an even more bizarre atmosphere. The proper boxing journalists that will be covering this fight will have to ask them. It's been one of the biggest stories in the sport for so long. We need to understand how those 2 failed tests arose, and if Conor is innocent, as he has always vehemently insisted, who is to blame for those failed tests? And we know how much it's cost him, not only in his career and his legacy and his reputation and his pocket. What's it going to cost those people? Because if the people involved in taking the test or ruling on the test are at fault, then Conor deserves massive compensation. And he deserves to have his reputation utterly cleared, rather than this bizarre cloud that hangs over it where it looks like he's just beaten this doping case without proving his innocence. But the fight is happening. It will happen, we believe, April 26 at Tottenham Stadium. It will be bankrolled by Saudi Arabia. It was a good thing that this fight was made with no belts. We regularly give too much credibility to the sanctioning bodies who charge fighters to pay for their belts. So if we can move away from that, that's great. But the issue was then that it was going to be a catchweight. Conor Benn is a 147-pound welterweight fighter. Chris Eubank Jr. is a middleweight who for big fights used to go up to 168 pounds and compete at super middle. It looked like a mismatch. And in boxing, whether it's Jake Paul and Mike Tyson fighting with 30 years difference or huge weight disparities, which we know are dangerous, it's not healthy. Chris Eubank Sr. spoke out massively against it with some really emotional quotes, especially having lost his own son, Sebastian, in a very separate, heartbreaking incident. He didn't want to lose another son. He didn't want to see his son boil down to the 157 to 159 pound limit that the first one was agreed to. This time around, it looks like Conor Benn's team had suggested the story was done, that the fight would be at 160 pounds, a middleweight limit, but there would be a strict 10-pound rehydration clause involved to stop it at 170, to stop Chris Eubank putting on too much water and muscle. That seems strange because Conor's posts have constantly been that he didn't care and that he walks around at the same weight as Chris anyway. Eubank has gone back and called Team Ben rats for now trying to enforce this. The 10-pound rehydration clause is usually enforced by the IBF when they want to look after a fighter who's being dehydrated. But this is a catchweight fight for no belts. So this is just being done to gain an advantage. All these strange things will be taking place, all these strange interviews and press elements are going to have to happen, but the fight is happening. With no belts from the WBC, WBA, WBO or IBF, we're looking at something that's more like the WWE. There's going to be such toxic build-up, voices that are so for the fight, voices that are vehemently and emotionally against it. The fight is not built on even a fair level playing field. It's not for an English title, a Southern area, a British title. It's for these apparent bragging rights. It's for family legacy. But that's what most of the WWE fights are for. And neither one of these guys is going to leap into a world title fight after this. But it's going on, and lots of questions are going to be asked. And the main one, eventually, once we get through the nitty-gritty of how the fight has been made, lost, and remade, is which one of these second-generation fighters is the toughest?